Welcome back to Barely Legal Immigration, the podcast where we explore the most creative ways to avoid commitment while living your best Middle Eastern life. I'm your host, and today we're talking about something near and dear to my heart: how to stay in Israel without actually making Aliyah. Because let's be honest, who has time for all that paperwork? So picture this: you've fallen in love with Israel. You love the hummus, obviously. You love the constant construction noise that starts precisely at 6 a.m. every morning, like some kind of Mediterranean rooster. You love the way literally everyone becomes a driving instructor the moment you get behind the wheel. And somehow you've grown fond of getting into heated political debates while buying cucumbers at the shuk. But making Aliyah? That sounds so permanent, so official. So much standing in line at government offices where nobody speaks English but everyone has very strong opinions about your documents. Fear not, my commitment-phobic listeners. I've compiled a completely legitimate list. And by legitimate, I mean the Ministry of Interior is definitely not going to find this amusing, of alternatives to actually immigrating. First up, we have what I like to call the eternal tourist method. This is for the truly dedicated. You master the art of the 90-day visa shuffle until you become so familiar with Ben-Gurion Airport that the security guards start asking about your family's health. You develop this complex rotation system between Cyprus, Jordan, and that one sketchy Airbnb in Eilat, where the owner has definitely never actually checked if you left the country. Pro tip: befriend someone at the Taba border crossing. They'll start to appreciate the consistency, maybe even save you a coffee. Then there's the digital Nomad Disguise. You claim you're working remotely while sitting in the exact same cafe on Rothschild Boulevard for 8 months straight. You insist that your flexible lifestyle just happens to require you to be within walking distance of the best shakshuka in Tel Aviv, which, let's be real, is a legitimate business requirement. When anyone questions this arrangement, you gesture vaguely at your laptop and mutter something about global markets and time zone optimization. Bonus points if you can work the phrase blockchain into the conversation. Now, for the academically inclined, there's the academic escape route. You enroll in Hebrew University for a PhD in, Comparative Falafel studies, or the socio-economic impact of arguing about which hummus is best. Your thesis can be 847 pages on why Abu Hassan is superior to Said. Controversial take, I know, don't at me. By the time you finish this degree, you'll either have naturalized through pure persistence, or the university will grant you honorary citizenship just to make you go away. Moving on to the volunteer Visa Volleyball. And yes, I'm proud of that alliteration. You become a professional volunteer, jumping from one program to another like you're collecting Pokemon cards. 3 months, dawe woofing on a kibbutz, where you learn that picking oranges at 5 a.m. is not as romantic as it sounds. Then you switch to teaching English to new immigrants who are somehow more motivated than you've ever been in your life. Then you volunteer at an archaeological dig, where your main qualification is the ability to point enthusiastically at pottery shards and go, wow, that's definitely old. You create this volunteer resume that reads like a spiritual journey but is really just a masterclass in visa extension techniques. And then we have what I delicately call the strategic romance route. You fall in love with an Israeli citizen. Not for the residency benefits, of course. That would be cynical, and we're nothing if not pure of heart here. You just happen to be attracted to people who can navigate the bureaucracy of Misrad Hapnim with the precision of a military operation and know exactly which window at the bank is fastest on Tuesday mornings. Fair warning, though. Side effects may include learning to argue about politics in 3 languages and becoming emotionally invested in your local makalet owner's opinions about literally everything that has ever happened in the history of the world. There's also the perpetual student strategy. You enroll in Ulpan, after Ulpan, until you become that person. You know the one. the oldest student in every Hebrew class, patiently explaining to 22-year-old gap year. Kids that yes, you do indeed know what shalom means, but you're here for the immersive cultural experience. You develop this touching backstory about your lifelong dream to master the nuances of Hebrew grammar, when really you just want to stay close to that amazing hummus place near campus that only the students know about. For the spiritually inclined, we have the religious tourism loop. You embark on this endless spiritual journey that would make Elizabeth Gilbert jealous. 6 months studying Kabbalah in Safed, where you learn that mystical wisdom is best absorbed while eating incredible cheese. Then you switch to meditation retreats in the desert, where you discover that enlightenment is really hard to achieve when there's sand in literally everything you own, followed by intensive Torah study in Jerusalem. When anyone asks about your long-term plans, you respond with mystical quotes about finding your path, while conveniently omitting that your path mostly leads to the same rental apartment you've been subletting for 2 years. Then there's the startup intern infinity circle. Tel Aviv has enough startups that you can theoretically work as an international business development intern forever, jumping from one company to another just as your visa expires like some kind of corporate nomad. You master the art of explaining your gap year that has somehow lasted 3 years, and you perfect this pitch about how you're exploring the intersection of technology and ancient wisdom, which honestly sounds impressive enough that nobody asks too many follow-up questions. We also have the family visit that never ends. This requires some creativity, and possibly a very understanding family tree. You start by visiting your cousin's friend's sister who lives in Haifa. Then you suddenly remember your great-aunt's neighbor who moved to Beersheba in 1987. Eventually, you're visiting the third cousin twice removed of someone you met at a hostel in Prague 5 years ago. But hey, in Israel, if you dig deep enough, everyone's basically family, right? For the artistically inclined, there's the artistic residency rotation. You declare yourself an artist, and honestly, living in Israel without proper documentation is pretty much performance art at this point, and applied to every residency program in the country. 3 months in a Jaffa art colony creating installations inspired by the Mediterranean light, which is really just you hanging sheets on a clothesline in interesting patterns. Then you move to a writer's retreat in the Galilee where you're working on your novel about diaspora and belonging. Spoiler alert, it's actually just your diary entries about trying to stay in Israel, but it's surprisingly compelling material. And finally, we have the medical tourism marvel. You develop this mysterious condition that requires ongoing treatment exclusively available in Israel. Nothing too serious. We're not trying to scam the healthcare system here, but something chronic enough to require regular checkups. Bonus points if you can convince a doctor at Hadassah that your ailment is stress-related and can only be managed through regular exposure to Tel Aviv beaches and Jerusalem sunsets. Doctor, I've tried everything, but my condition only improves when I'm eating sabich and arguing about the proper way to make jaknun. Now, here's the thing, and this might blow your mind. You could always just make Aliyah. I know, it's a radical concept. Fill out the forms, deal with the bureaucracy, commit to the beautiful chaos that is life in Israel. Stand in those lines, argue with those officials, learn to love the sound of construction at dawn. But honestly, where's the fun in doing things the easy way? The truth is, the best way to truly experience Israeli culture might actually be spending several years trying to outsmart the system, arguing with officials in 3 languages you don't quite speak fluently, and developing this weirdly intimate relationship with every visa office between Metula and Eilat. You'll learn more Hebrew from trying to extend your tourist visa than you ever did in Ulpan, and you'll definitely develop the kind of bureaucratic survival skills that would make any Sabra proud. Plus, there's something beautifully, absurdly Israeli about the whole thing. This is a country where everything is complicated, where the simplest task requires at least 3 different government offices and a letter from your rabbi, and where somehow, against all odds, everything works out in the end. So maybe your immigration journey, fitting that pattern, is actually the most authentic way to become Israeli after all. And that's a wrap on today's episode of Barely Legal Immigration. Remember, this advice comes with a disclaimer. I take absolutely no responsibility for any consequences resulting from following these suggestions, including but not limited to deportation, suspicious looks from border control, developing an unhealthy obsession with bureaucratic forms, or, and this is the real danger, accidentally falling in love with the country so hard that you end up making Aliyah anyway. Until next time, this is your host reminding you that whether you're here on a tourist visa, a student visa, or just pure determination and chutzpah, welcome to Israel, even if nobody's quite sure how you're staying here. Shalom and see you next week. You.